In goes Beveridge, Lappin again. Gathered by Fletcher. Handball over the top. This may open it up. No, Dodd. Dispossessed by Everitt. Well done, Spida. The big Spida! Go! Oh, he tried to bounce. It didn't come off, but he crashes through the tackle. It then goes bang. And it's play of the night by Peter Everitt. Magnificent goal.
Look, yeah, Bong was right. I was one of those wayward kids, those teenagers, go through the 20s and obviously up to the 30s, and then I finally come home. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate this night.
Well, it is our pleasure on the program to catch up with one of our favourites from the Saints. Spida Everitt played 180 games for St Kilda between 1993 and 2002, a dual All-Australian, won the best and fairest in 2001 as well. Spida, thanks for jumping on.
No, it's always a pleasure. It's great to be a part of it. And, you know, when you're retired after a few years and anything to do with footy, you still got to put try and put your hat in the ring to keep yourself out there.
Going to plonk you on the spot. First up, we've been at the time that we're recording this podcast. It's the anniversary of Robert Harvey playing his first game for the Saints. So we've been reminiscing on favourite Robert Harvey memories. Is there one that stands out? I mean, you were his teammate for probably 11 years or thereabouts. So is there one thing in particular that stands out for Robert Harvey?
Do you want to give one or two or 10? No. Look, I often say that, I won Robert Harvey back-to-back Brownlows because a Rover's only as good as their Ruckman. So if I decide to hit it to Nathan Burke that year or a couple of other players, Harves would never have been in the show. So I try and claim that. Not really, he did deserve them, especially when, he won the first one, unfortunately, after, Thingo got disqualified, and then he come back in 98 and won it. But Harves, I suppose, I travelled to Ireland with Harves, I roomed with Harves in the All-Australian team, and he was one not to say a lot, but I just remember on Mad Mondays, when we used to be allowed to have Mad Mondays those days, and we used to go out and go as hard as we could for pretty much 24, 48 hours, that would always end up for some reason at a blackjack table. And myself, Robert Harvey, Stephen Zilla, we all drunk Jim Beam. So we're all the bourbon drinkers. So, Harves would always be at the front of the table playing blackjack, but he'd nearly pass out. So we're always playing with Harves' money because he was on the biggest money. Myself and Zilla would be sitting behind him, getting the free bourbon and playing with his money, and he'd be asleep. The only time he'd wake up was every probably, 15, 20 minutes. The dealer would go insurance. Harves would raise his head, put a couple of dollars forward to put insurance, and then go back to sleep for another 15 minutes.
Ultimate teammate.
Oh, we loved him.
And one more from me before I hand it over to the boys as well. Probably a painful memory, but one that I have to ask. Would we have won the 97 grand final if you were there, do you reckon? I mean, you're obviously in that sort of form, and we know that Pittman and Wren were able to double-team Stewie Lowe in that grand final. Is that one where you sort of wake up occasionally and think, geez, if that shoulder hadn't have popped out, we might have won that flag?
Oh, the longer you retired, the more you say, I reckon by now we would have won by 15 goals. But, look, at the time, you're 24, you think Ozzie Jones, Tony Brown, Joel Smith, this, Maxie Hudson, this young group coming through, we're going to play it every year. So you didn't really think about it. And then when you get to the end of your career and you know that was your only real golden opportunity, you do, feel, you're disappointed about it, but at the same time, Laser Vidovic, had the knee reco, and myself and him worked really well together. And what I suppose I missed the most was the fact that myself and Sean Wren, both very similar players, both similar height, and it would have been a really, really good battle come the end of the season because we had some good battles throughout the years, and it was just that, to win the ultimate prize off a really good battle against somebody you respect so much would have been awesome, but unfortunately it was never to be. And we know how, when you look back in history books, how hard it is. 66 since the last, premiership, and been there a couple of times, but it's just so tough to get there. So didn't really appreciate it at the time, thinking it's going to happen every year. But now, as soon as you're retired and you see some guys who have got 2, 3, 4, you kind of sit there and go, you know what, that was probably our golden opportunity.
Now, Spide, Nick Splitter here, mate. Thank you for joining us on the pod. From a reasonably painful memory for all of us, how about your favourite memory in the red, white and black? Obviously, you were there through a couple of really memorable moments for Saints fans, from '96 Ansett Cup win, the whole '97 season. To be honest, what's your number one memory?
Oh, really, really hard because I really appreciate the football club, and when you walk into AFL football and you don't know, majority of us don't know where we're going to be heading, outside of school. So you get an opportunity to play footy, and then it turns into a full-time career. And, the '96 Ansett Cup, and, you have coaches like Stan Ells and Tim Watson come in, but then you're playing alongside players like Robert Harvey, Mickey Winmar, Gil McAdam, Danny Frawley, Stuart White, and the list can go on. So there's so many great memories. But I think just the fact of being inducted into the Hall of Fame earlier on in the year was probably one of the proudest moments. I was able to have all my girls there and my young fella who hopefully wants to play for the Saints one day. But just having all the family there, and then not only that, seeing so many of the former players from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and just what the club's been able to build over the last few years is just getting all the ex-players back to build a form of legacy. Because when I went to other clubs, you go to Adelaide or you go to WA and they have those players in the change rooms. So I reckon it makes a real big difference. So I suppose outside of my playing career, I just thought that was a real big highlight for me, and really tough to be able to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and at the same time being around so many great players of so many great eras.
G'day, Spida. Aaron here. Great to speak to you. Basically, I'm going to go back to pretty early in your career. You came in after we've left Moorabbin, so you didn't see any footy out there. But fourth game in, do you remember where you were playing?
What's that, the fourth game in?
Fourth game, yep.
Yeah, well, we played a couple of 2 games at Moorabbin, and you used to, sitting in the change rooms and you'd hear the crowd going off, and then that's when, one of the trainers or one of the coaches would say, "Oh yeah, Plugger's got the ball." And you could only hear it coming through all the vents of the change rooms there at Moorabbin, and you just knew when Plugger got the ball because the crowd and the atmosphere was amazing. But fourth round in, Victoria Park, Nicky Winmar lifted up his jumper and pointed to the colour of his skin.
Scary place to play?
Oh, no, even that day I remember, because such a historical game in the AFL, and I've been done for racial vilification, but played alongside some of the great Indigenous players, and that day there I remember a couple of incidents. One, I went to pick up the ball out of the gutter and I got hit over the head with an umbrella, and I looked up and I reckon the lady was about 80 and just looked at me and just started laughing. And here's what you expect at Victoria Park. There was no hot water. It was all cold showers. But as we were walking off, I reckon, it looked like beer, but it was warm. And I don't reckon it was beer that was tipped on us. So, look, they weren't the most respectful crowd, but that's what you love about footy is the passion behind it. And when Winmar done that and made a really big stance, I remember just the hype around the change rooms, the hype around just everybody just not knowing exactly how big this was going to be. Even Winmar in the change rooms was actually quite frightened, to exit, but ended up being good and ended up being the biggest statement probably in football history.
Absolutely. Now, I guess in terms of modern times, now you excelled in what was a difficult year for the club. So you won the best and fairest in 2001 when there was a coaching change. Malcolm Blight went out, Grant Thomas came in, which is a position St Kilda finds themselves in now, where a coach has been sacked, there's a caretaker in the role. Can you sort of take us through what that was like in terms of how you dealt with the coaching change, what you were expecting to get out of the back half of the year? And I know you've had your clashes with Grant Thomas over recent times, but perhaps what got Grant Thomas the job in terms of being appointed after that caretaker stint?
Yeah, it's always tough, and I think this situation is totally different than Grant Thomas, because Malcolm Blight and Grant Thomas were good friends. I remember flying up to the Gold Coast where I live now to get Blighty, and it was I remember just walking into Zen, which is the Chinese restaurant at the casino, which is Star now, and getting on it for the whole night and trying to slide a contract in front of him after he'd drunken, I reckon, around about 45 bottles of red wine. So it was a remarkable circumstance. We had Rod Butters and Grant Thomas, and then obviously we know what's happened with Rod Butters and his addictions and everything, and then Grant Thomas. So that kind of situation, Grant Thomas, I don't think was, I suppose, the best person for the job, but at the same time, he was the best person that Butters and everyone knew to take over. So, Tomo controlled a lot of the footy club and not just the footy side of things. He went on to make finals, so he could actually coach. There's no doubt about that. But this time around, I think with unfortunately, the earlier Saki and now Brett Ratton taking over, I think the selection policy or theory is going to be a lot different. Brett Ratton probably being stiff to get sacked out of Carlton in the first place. Do St Kilda need a couple more players? Yes. So it's a totally different, and every year changes. And we know that. I always try to tell people this because I live on the Gold Coast at the moment and associate with the Gold Coast Suns, where it's so hard to make the top 8, let alone the top 4 or the top 2. You've got to get so many things right. And for the St Kilda Footy Club at the moment, back when Grant Thomas was, I suppose, appointed, there wasn't so many, it wasn't as harsh as it is today. 10 years ago, footy wasn't as harsh. You didn't have so many media people covering. You didn't have so many channels. Even though it was still professional, you still didn't have the harshness of what it is today. So, I think they've got their work cut out trying to find the right person, because realistically, who is the right person? It's a tough choice, because who knows? Now,
Spide, 93, 94, 95, we had a tall, kind of running, goal-kicking ruckman come in and revolutionised that position for us at the footy club. 25 years later, we've got another tall, big running, big man who can kick a goal and get around the ground in Rowan Marshall. What are your thoughts on Big Row?
Yeah, look, I watched him last weekend, and it was fantastic. And that's what you got to be able to do. Unfortunately, you look at Brody.
Brody Grundy
from Brody Grundy from Collingwood, and you look at Max Gorn. What's Max Gorn? I think, I don't know. There's a question mark still over, because I think Corey McKernan, those kind of players, Jeff White, really changed that way of how Ruckman played. So I think they've got to be able to play those two positions, as you say, run back, run forward. And I remember through our career, like Dean Cox, these kind of fellas, they were in the top 5, top 6 runners in their football club. So it's no longer with a ruckman, coming in at the back end, just trying to make up the numbers. Now they're actually extreme athletes. They can cover the ground, and as you say, they can actually kick goals. I think it's vital that you've got to be able to play a couple of positions, but you need a couple of them, and you need to be able to. A lot of I suppose media outlets sit there and bag the ruckman, and then suddenly Brody Grundy has a great year and saying, he's probably in Brownlow medal form, which is great to see a ruckman actually win a Brownlow. But what he's been able to do is just extend of what happened in that 93, 94, 95 season, when the ruckman started to go forward, kick goals, be creative, and make another avenue. So what they often said, that what were we? We're Rover in a big man's body. That was about it.
Now, going back to another goal kicker that has revolutionised the game, you've got to play with him a couple of years to start with, but Nick Riewoldt, when he first started at the club and came in, and did you know that he was going to revolutionise the game like he did? The running forward that basically no one could catch.
Yeah, no, there's no way. I remember when he first got drafted, him and Justin Kaczynski, I think a couple of days later, they go on these training camps these days to, high altitude over at San Francisco or over to Arizona, and they do Cape York, they do Kokoda, they do all this. When Nick first got drafted, Grant Thomas took us to Warrnambool, and we went down there by train. And it was a bit different to what it is today. But even going down then, you look at Nick, and I think the way he was able to mould his game and his professionalism to get himself right. And when you see somebody And I've been lucky enough to play alongside, I suppose Adam Goods, who's another person exactly the same, who plays multiple games in a row, and it's not just through luck. It's actually through preparation and recovery, and that's one thing that Nick was very, very good on. His preparation was right. He knew what he needed to do, and his recovery was just as good. So, being able to be a player of that discipline in that era showed that it paid dividends in the end. So, one of the greatest players, of the AFL and also the St Kilda Footy Club. So, I think if anyone out there is listening and any kids are listening, just you go back and think about your preparation and your recovery are two of the major things that Nick did to get himself right every week.
My last one for you. You spoke a little bit off air. We were talking about how, of all the clubs you've played for Hawthorn and Sydney as well, that you have sort of come back to St Kilda. I guess in terms of that, is it more about you sort of started with St Kilda, you spent most of your career with St Kilda. We would argue you played your best footy with St Kilda, even though you were good, obviously, elsewhere. But it does appear now that your heart lies with the red, white and black, certainly more than the others.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I'm proud to say it. And I know that, I went to Hawthorn and also Sydney and learned a lot going to those football clubs. And you look back now and everybody would love to be a one-club player like, your Robert Harvey, your Stuart Lowe, your Danny Frawley, through the era that I was playing, Nick Riewoldt. But it wasn't to be. But, what I love now is the fact that not only just being in the Hall of Fame is that you've got Kenny Sheldon, you've got Russell Morris, these blokes actually building a legacy about the former players. And a lot of the players love getting back there, love talking, the old stories, and love getting around the new blokes as well. And most of us, a lot of us have gone on to do different things and love to support and, look after the younger guys going through, because we know exactly what it was like when we went through. So, no doubt I'm more associated with St Kilda than any other club. And really proud to be and want to continue in the future. And, my young fella, we signed him up into the St Edge Club this year, so he's trying to improve himself through it. And when we go down there, you see Milne's young fella playing there and a couple of others. So look, I really enjoy it. Unfortunately, I live on the Gold Coast, I can get down there half a dozen times a year, but those half a dozen times a year, we love it.
And Spide, you touched on the fact that players love coming back to Moorabbin and back to the club. What is it from a player's perspective that makes the place and makes the club so magical? I know as a 34 year-long member and fan, and it's often hard to describe to new supporters or new footy interested people what it is about St Kilda with our history and the losses over the wins and the sacked coaches and all that sort of stuff. What is it from a playing perspective that makes it so magical?
Look, I think, just because, unfortunately with the Saints throughout the years, there's been a lot of dramas. And as you say, from the coaches sitting on, going to the bottom of the ladder and slowly getting up there. And, you've got so much support out there. And we know we're everyone's second favourite team. And, we have got so many passionate St Kilda supporters, but as players, it's just that, as you say, it's that heart and soul of football. That's what it is. The Moorabbin, to come back to Moorabbin, to see it, I know it's been, renovated, but you can still get down on the ground and just feel, what, this is what, that's what footy we play, that's the footy we play for, is the fact that it's such a tight-knit, hard football club. And, we used to have so many great times together, but everyone used to say, we're the party kings, but you know what, there was a lot of teams out there that party harder than us, but we knew that we'd always get to training and have a ball together. So, I think, and what I love about it too is just that the volunteers, I know every club has volunteers, but I can reel off 10, 15 volunteers that have been there even now, since, ever since I was there, and from the doctors to the physios to the people at the front desk to historians, the trainers, and that's what builds football clubs and that's what builds cultures. And it doesn't matter if you go in there to have a beer with, a former player, a former person that ran water or a physio. I still catch up with the doc today, and that's what it's about. It was just a really tight love football club, and I don't know. That's I don't think you got 100 years of tradition there. And that's the passion that people bring. I can't see it here on the Gold Coast, and it will take decades and decades for them to build it. So it's hard to explain, but it's one of those things, I suppose, when your back's to the wall a lot of the time, you seem to, galvanise a lot closer.
Yeah, a little bit after football life, and as you're saying, you're living up on the Gold Coast and travelling is your thing. Barring a miracle, our pre-season's going to start a bit earlier than a lot of other teams, and so basically I just want to try and find out from you best location for us to travel to coming up in the off-season, and where's somewhere that keeps drawing you back to go visit?
Oh, look, to be honest, I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot of Australia, New Zealand, over the last couple of years doing my travel show. But, I still believe, and I was lucky enough to do it when I retired in 2008, and as I mentioned, I had that run-in with race for vilification. So I said, you know what, I want to go out to some of the communities in, the back blocks of Northern Territory and WA up around the Kimberleys. And if you can get players to go out there, I don't know if you get a bus, a motorhome, you get some four-wheel drives and go out to some of these communities that absolutely breathe AFL each and every day, and they have not much in their life other than sport. They struggle to get to school, but if there's sport involved, they get there. It's a really, really good eye-opener. So for me, I'd be going to outback Northern Territory, Western Australia, Tiwi Islands, and just getting the boys to really appreciate the opportunity they've got, at the same time giving back, because a lot of these kids in these communities, like 3 hours west of Alice Springs, you got to turn left at a tree that's full of beer cans, turn right at the sack of tyres and get there. And then suddenly you turn up and there's 50, 60 kids, and they're named after Nick Riewoldt, Cyril Rioli. That's their names. That's who they've got other names, but they go, no, my name's Nick Riewoldt. So I think for kids to see, for people to see that, I didn't see that to the end of my career, but absolutely loved it, and I took my daughters along, and they did as well. So I think if I was a coach these days, and I know Hawthorn will go to Kokoda, but keeping it local, going out to some of those communities and some of the really remote ones where these young kids don't get to see the legends they absolutely idolise, would be enormous for both sides.
Spida, you're a ripper for the Saints. It was always great fun watching you over the journey. Thanks for giving us a slab of your time to have a chat with us this week.
No worries at all. Thank you very much. Anytime.